Hello everybody, Chris here, and in this video I'm going to be comparing OpenShot with KDEnlive. If you want the too long, didn't watch short answer, I prefer KDEnlive personally, but here we're going to go through some of these things I wrote up, and we'll discuss how it applies to each of these two projects. So in OpenShot, which is the program on the left for Ubuntu Linux, we have the ability to do animated titles. And not just animated titles, but also some animated titles which are straight out of Blender files. So you have some integration into Blender with this, at least with some of these default titles. That also does mean if you want to use some of these, like exploding text, I believe, that you have to specify where your Blender install is on Ubuntu Linux, or else it's not going to be able to render properly. Yep, there you can see there. So I had a little bit of an issue in order to get this set up, but theoretically it does work, and I think that's pretty cool because a lot of the cool 3D animations for titles have been done in Blender specifically. So on the KDEnlive side of things, you have the ability to actually make cuts in your video with doing a simple Shift R. So if I go here, and let's just mute the video, the audio of my actual desktop here, and I want to cut, let's say, right here, and all I need to do is hit Shift R on my keyboard. Really simple, right? It's a good hotkey for it being able to cut. But if I go back over into OpenShot, there's no such similar shortcut. Shift R is actually more like a search. And in order to cut, I have to use the cut tool over here and then click on the track, and I need to do that for each of these tracks. It takes a couple seconds. It's just overall quite a bit slower. And also worth noting with the cutting, you have the ability to see the audio levels inside of KDEnlive, and that can be useful because you can see when you end a sentence without actually listening to the track. Okay, so for OpenShot, many of the transitions have a visual preview. Rather than just seeing a text name like in KDEnlive, you can actually see these transitions before you drag them and apply them onto your video. So I think that's really cool because then you don't need to really search through all of them as much. You can just kind of eyeball it and figure out, oh, well, this is pretty cool. Like maybe I want a puzzle transition, and then you just drop it in, and that's all well and good. But if you want to do a transition in KDEnlive, you'd be going to something like add transition, and then you can see there's a huge list of them. There is quite a few transitions. But the problem is all you get is text, and you don't even get like a description, so you really got to play around with it in order to figure out not only exactly what it does, but also how to use it. So you're going to have a learning curve in KDEnlive that OpenShot doesn't really have. Okay, so in KDEnlive, yeah, as I mentioned, there's lots of effects, and that applies to transitions. It also applies to effects here. If you look in audio, there are so many effects that they need 4 subcategories. That is a tremendous amount of audio effects, and I don't know what half of them do yet, given I've only been using KDEnlive for about a week or two. But although you have a ton of effects, that doesn't mean you know how to use them. And what good is knowing that there are effects there until you've actually spent the time to figure out how they are used properly. Once again, tying back into that learning curve thing, more power once you become an expert at the program, but a bit more confusing initially. And specifically with OpenShot, though, maybe it has less effects overall, but when it comes to color, there's a tremendous amount here as well. I think that's about 30-ish, give or take, and I think I would reckon that color effects are some of those that people like to use a lot, especially when it comes to photo and video editing. So having these here specifically is pretty relevant if that's your kind of thing, if you want to try some of these effects like pixelate. Back on the KDEnlive side of things, in addition to just transitions and effects, oh man, I keep pointing out that there's a lot to it, but really, when it comes to KDEnlive, it's more complete as a program. There's just many more options that you have available, and if you were to compare it to Windows video editors, KDEnlive does feel a lot more like a Adobe Premiere, where OpenShot might be something like a good version of Windows Movie Maker. One of the cool things about OpenShot specifically is that if you go into the preferences, you can see all of your installed video, audio formats Just by going in here and scrolling down the list, you wouldn't necessarily need to check in the terminal of your computer. You can just kind of figure out what is supported inside of your program. And as you can see, it supports stuff pretty well. All of your standard formats like AVI, MP4, that's going to be there. And pretty much the same applies for KDEnlive as well, but you can see for sure in that settings menu of OpenShot that you can, in fact, mess around with it inside of this program. One of the things I like best about KDEnlive is its ability to interact with Audacity, Gimp, or any audio editor or visual graphic image editor that you happen to install on your system. So for instance, if I right-click this and extract a new audio file straight out of the video, basically separating the video from the audio, and then I right-click the audio clip, I can hit Edit Clip, which will open it up in your audio program of choice, in my case, set to Audacity. And then I'd be able to apply the advanced functionality of Audacity to modify the audio and easily put it back into KDEnlive. Unfortunately, OpenShot doesn't really have an equivalent so much. And in fact, you can't really even say extract the audio. I think what you would do in OpenShot is import the MP4 file directly into Audacity, which means opening it up from outside the app. And that does work. It's just a couple more steps that you have to take care of. So if you haven't gotten the sense of OpenShot just by looking at the menus, it really is kind of a application of KISS, or Keep It Simple, Stupid. Because there's not a huge amount of things going on inside of OpenShot, but the advantage to that is that it's really hard to get confused. It's pretty straightforward when you have about 6 controls over here on the video clip editing. Generally, the basic idea, you just create cuts, remove what you want, piece them together, and then maybe add a couple fades or something like that between them, or come up here and add transitions and effects. And that's really all you need for 90% of video editing. But since KDEnlive is kind of the Adobe Premiere equivalent, you can get so much more in depth with the program. But honestly, is it really necessary for 90% of people, especially for YouTube videos? A lot of it is just kind of, it's there, but 99% sure you're never going to use it. So it's kind of redundant, and it almost gets in the way a little bit. So here's another editing feature of KDEnlive that I think has an edge over OpenShot. It's the ability to, after deleting a clip, remove the white space between 2 clips and basically sync them up so that one goes straight into another. So if I hit Shift-R here, it's going to make that cut, as I mentioned earlier. I can right-click the clip or select it and then hit delete on my keyboard. But now I need to right-click between the space, hit Remove Space, and it's automatically going to take everything beyond that and shift it over there to the left. So that's a really quick way of editing between them. So in OpenShot, you do have a similar feature, which is the snapping over here with the magnet. So if I take this clip and move it close to the first clip, it's going to realize that they're meant to be basically together with each other, and it should automatically kind of snap them together there. You have to be pretty close, but you can see it kind of moving itself instead of leaving half a second of open space there. So that is nice. Also in OpenShot, I believe you have quicker title templates. If we go to Title New, you'll see that it basically gives us the pre-formatted text, the font coloring, a little bit of bevel there, I believe, to make it pop out a bit. And when we create our titles, all we really need to do is select one of these templates, some of which better than others, and go ahead, hit Create New Title, specify in the name of the title as it will be in the project, and then the text of the title. So text 1, text 2. And for the most part, that'll be pretty much fine for most people. I mean, you can edit it a little bit more, but the KDEnlive equivalent, if we go up here to add title clip, is a lot more complicated, really. It's almost like opening up Gimp and editing an entire image to import into KDEnlive, which is a perfectly valid way of creating a title. So we could edit here and be something like Title 1, and then maybe that's too small because we're not using a template, we're creating it by our defaults. So we gotta play around with it a little bit. We gotta figure out what looks good based on our screen. And then beyond that, there's going to be a lot of extra settings you need to add over here to get it just perfect. And yes, it's not going to be too bad, but I would say overall, in OpenShot, you're going to be done with your title clips a little bit sooner. That said, having a more fully functional editor here will allow you to have more options, near infinite options, when it comes to creating your clips in KDEnlive. So in OpenShot, one of the other cool things is that you have a bunch of themes installed by default. Not a huge amount. I like the Hollow theme, but you can easily change it over to something like Blue Flat, Tango, Elementary, or other ways of kind of displaying the timeline. I, of course, prefer that kind of darker colors. But in KDEnlive, although you definitely can theme it, they don't come out of the box. So if we go down to theme, you see default and configuration, but you'd actually need to install them to the themes directory of KDEnlive in order to get that to work, which is perfectly fine if you're willing to put a little bit of time into it, but it does take more effort than obviously having them pre-installed. As far as exporting your videos out, the exporter of OpenShot is kind of simplistic. For the most part, you can just come here, select a couple profiles like, hey, I want to put it up on the web, and then you choose a site like YouTube, HD. Then just choose your FPS, and that's all well and good. You'd be able to export your video just like that. However, I think when it comes to modifying the advanced settings and that kind of thing to get it exactly how you want, KDEnlive's going to have an advantage there, and you do have a few here nested down. But if we go to the KDEnlive exporter by going to Project Render, you got quite a bit more options here, like setting the video quality, the audio bitrate, rescaling the video, having it play after you render it, and so on and so forth. And additionally, in KDEnlive, if you have multiple projects that need to get rendered out simultaneously, you have a job queue. So you can just start a render, have it work in the background, and actually have multiple projects getting ready to render while you're working, where I believe in OpenShot, you can only really do one at a time, and that's probably fine for most people, but having this render queue is a cool option to have. Okay, so lastly for this video, a couple of nice bonuses of both of the programs. In OpenShot, you can actually upload your videos straight to something like YouTube once you have created them. I mean, obviously you need to select the video file here, but once you go ahead and do that, you just choose your target and you can upload the title, description, your username and password on the site and get your video up there without necessarily needing to use your web browser. Something that I don't personally use a lot, but I can imagine some people would really like this feature. Now, in KDEnlive, one of the features I do like that a lot of other apps don't really have is the ability to record inside of the program. So if I deselect my clips in the project bin and I go over here to the clip monitor, there's going to be a plus sign over here where you can click that and you'll see the options for recording, checking whether you want video or audio, selecting whether you want a webcam, basically doing like a vlog, or screen grab, which is basically screencasting like I'm doing right now. And then finally, configure recording, which you can also access through the menus over there, but this takes you straight into it, where you can kind of modify your settings for recording. And as you can see, there's quite a few here. Does take a little bit of playing around with in configuration. As you can see, when you do go into the profiles, it's kind of like terminal stuff, so may not be the most intuitive to get working, but it is nice to have once you do. So I've been Chris. I hope this gave you a good idea of OpenShot versus KDEnlive. I think that OpenShot is a fine tool, but it's kind of simplistic, more of a Windows Movie Maker type of app, whereas KDEnlive is more of an Adobe Premiere, but open source and free. So personally, I like to use KDEnlive, and hopefully that gives you an idea of which of the two apps you personally want to go with. So thank you for watching. If you found this video useful, consider donating to the channel down below, and I'll see you in my future videos.